My name is Marcia Connett. I am the Southeast Regional Consultant here for Wisconsin Literacy, and I am so pleased to welcome you and our guests this morning. Our guests came to us because Bridget, who is one of the presenters today, actually was the executive director of the Walworth County Literacy Program when I first came to Wisconsin Literacy. And since then, her life has changed a whole lot. Bridget, were you an attorney when you had that job?
Yeah, so I was a public defender and then adopted our daughter, was a tutor, became the coordinator.
That was it. Yup. Yeah. And since then, her life has morphed in other ways, and she is now with a law firm in Milwaukee that does work in this very area. So rather than wasting any more time, Bridget, welcome, and if you would please introduce your staff.
Thank you, Marcia. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Marcia kind of gave the background on myself. I'm an immigration attorney at Soborowski Immigration Law. Relatively new. I've been doing this for about a year, and still actively involved with the Walworth County Literacy Council. I'm on the board of directors. I've been a tutor, coordinator, kind of all aspects of the awesome Literacy Council down in Walworth County. I'd like to introduce you to Melissa Soborowski. Melissa is an absolute gem to the immigrant community. She's been an advocate for thousands of immigrants in Wisconsin and the nation worldwide. She's the managing attorney at Soborowski Immigration Law. She's been practicing and helping people for probably close to 15 years, all in all. She does a lot of pro bono work, really client-centric focus. So welcome to Melissa. And next we have Erica Makeda. She is our paralegal specializing in DACA applications. So it's really great that we can have her here. She is trilingual, so she really brings, that's a really important part for a lot of our clients. She has a very calm, peaceful, encouraging demeanor, which the DACA applicants really need and appreciate, because there's a lot of paperwork, hoops that they need to jump through. So welcome to Erica. Okay, so we're going to jump right in to our talk today about DACA. I just want to mention that if you have any questions, and we really hope that you do, if you could save those to the end or put those in the chat box, and then at the very end, we will address any and all questions that you might have about DACA. So today we're going to be talking, giving you a good overview as it pertains specifically to Education and Literacy Council. That's our focus. We're going to be talking about how today's program got started. I'll give you an overview of DACA. We'll talk about the kind of history of DACA, how it came to be up to today. We'll walk you through the criteria that DACA applicants need to meet, and there are quite a few specific criteria that are good to know and we hope to share with you. We'll talk to you about the application process, what needs to happen if someone wants to apply for DACA. We'll talk about something rather recent development called advanced parole. It's a travel option for DACA recipients, so that's a very important piece of information to keep in mind. We'll also share with you some recent developments, especially some things that are in the works with the new presidential administration. We'll walk you through some hypotheticals, kind of typical scenarios that we see in our law practice as they pertain to DACA participants. And at the end, we'll answer any questions that you guys have, okay? Okay, so I understand that recently USCIS spoke to the literacy councils, and it just is a logical connection, because I know so many of the literacy programs work with citizenship, there's just so many, once I started thinking about it, there's so many ways that literacy programs, education programs intersect with immigration law. And it's just really neat to see how we can both of these groups can work together for the sake of our clients, our students, the whole population. What happened in December, DACA kind of started moving again, and we'll talk later about why that happened. But Attorney Soborowski and I were in an initial consultation with a client. Great guy in his early 30s. He met every one of the various criteria to qualify for DACA, except when we got to the education requirement. So this was a man who had children, married. I believe he owned his own business, but he didn't have a diploma. He didn't have an HSED. And he told us basically, I don't have time to go to school, to enter a GED program at night. You know, he has a young family. So Melissa, Attorney Soborowski, and I started brainstorming, kind of researching a little bit more into DACA and the education requirement to find out what we could do for this gentleman. And it turns out there's some really amazing things in partnerships with literacy councils that we believe can help people qualify. So after the initial consultation with this gentleman, I contacted Marcia Connett, and Marcia gave me a wealth of information about all the programs in the Milwaukee area. So we have a lot of your program names, numbers, contact information, and it just became a real logical connection. And that initial list of programs led to our program today. So that's kind of how we got started. So DACA, what is it? The acronym itself stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Big mouthful. Basically, what does that mean? It means it's a temporary status. It's nothing permanent. It allows children who basically by no fault of their own, when they were brought by their parents, usually at a young age, and if they meet certain criteria, to apply for temporary protection. That's all it is. It's temporary. Now it's in 2-year increments. So this temporary protection lasts in a period of 2 years. DACA recipients can be able to work. They get employment authorization. They have the ability, most recently, to travel outside of the country, which is called advanced parole. So that's a big bonus for many individuals with DACA. They get a social security number, big plus, and they can drive with a driver's license, which, as you can imagine, has so many positive outcomes, because people have driver's license and they're not getting pulled over and getting ticketed for operating without a license, which opens up so many other doors in the criminal world, right? So there's a lot of positives, but what it isn't, it's nothing permanent as of today. It does not give DACA recipients a pathway to become a citizen or get a green card. As of today, that's not an option. It gives them a 2-year window, which can be extended, of protection. So who are typical DACA recipients? Who do we see? Well, truly, they're everywhere. DACA recipients are people that own businesses. They're people who are your children's coaches in sports teams. They're entrepreneurs. They're in the medical profession, the front line of the COVID fight. We have a really interesting client who developed a product, masks, some very ingenious kind of creation. And he has contracts with the city, with the government, he is in hot demand for his products, which are, you know, essential during this COVID time. So truly, DACA recipients are everywhere. In nationwide, there are about 800,000 DACA recipients. The reach potential could affect over 1 million people, but about around 800,000 have taken advantage of this amazing program. In Wisconsin, since the inception of the program, there's been a little over 8,000 people that have been received DACA. Currently, that number is about close to 7,000 in Wisconsin. So we're on the lower end of the spectrum. You can compare that with the highest state, which is California. They have over 200,000. I'd say Wisconsin, our demographics is kind of in the norm, but California is way up there and a couple other states. 55% of DACA recipients are employed. 83% are single. The average age for a DACA recipient is 23, but it could go lower and it could go higher. We'll talk about that later. What nationality or where do these DACA recipients come from? 80% come from Mexico. The remaining 20% come from Latin America, South America, and a few other places around the world, but the majority do come from Mexico. Really interesting, I think, correlation with education is that in Wisconsin, I mentioned that there is about currently 7,000 people that have DACA, but interestingly, about 2,000 people are estimated to qualify for DACA in every area except for education. So I believe that's where we come together. All of the literacy councils that are here today who are serving exactly this demographic, there's a need for you. Over at least 2,000 people, if they only had a tutor, if they were in one of your programs, it could open a whole nother door. So that's really an eye-opening statistic. Okay, and I'm going to turn it over now to Attorney Soborowski. She's going to talk about a little bit about the history, legal overview of the DACA program.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Bridget, earlier. That was very nice. And thank you to the Wisconsin Literacy Program for having us. This is a joy. I know that the three of us here in our office as a whole love serving the documented community. They're just a really inspiring group to work with, which is why it pains me to say that the history of DACA has really been a roller coaster. I'll just be frank. As many of you may have heard, when it happened in 2012, the Obama administration introduced it as an executive order. It really was just a stopgap program in order to give something to these individuals. Bridget put it really well when she said, to no fault of their own. Okay, these are kids brought before the age of 16. So in many ways, this is their home. So it really was hard to sort of find a status that wasn't passed by Congress that could just kind of tide people over, as we've emphasized, temporarily. So the program was born in 2012. And then in 2017, with an administration change, it was announced that the program would be ended. One of the earlier executive orders was to reverse Obama's executive order. And with it came the elimination of initial DACAs, the elimination of advanced parole, which again we'll discuss later, and probably one of the more scary things was they were going to phase out for folks that already had DACA, you know, basically having it end at a certain date in 2018. The federal courts then came in and they determined or decided that the rescission in 2017 was arbitrary and capricious. It should not have happened. So what it effectively did was put a pause on the rescission for renewals. Okay, so initials couldn't move forward anymore, but people who already had DACA could continue to renew. And then even bigger in the news probably for a lot of folks was hearing that the Supreme Court in June of last year announced that the rescission altogether was unconstitutional, the manner in which it happened. So it was determined or decided that it would be brought back in full. Okay, so that was pretty exciting news. We did not see that implemented though by USCIS until December of last year. Okay, so since then, and Erica can attest to this because she's our DACA person, she's our DACA paralegal. We're just getting a ton of these cases and we're really excited. Folks that weren't able to take advantage of DACA before for various reasons, or basically children who were too young to apply in 2017 when it was eliminated, but now, you know, are able to apply, we're able to help them. It's exciting. All right, so after that roller coaster, it was exciting to start talking about DACA for initial applicants again. I had to like pull back my memory back from 2017 because we hadn't done any initials in a while. So who is DACA for? It's for individuals that are 15 or older. Okay, so you have to be 15 or older to apply. You have to have also been 31 or younger on June 15th of 2012. Okay, and you also, there's a third age component, and that is that you enter the United States before you turn 16. Okay, so DACA is very date sensitive, so those 3 age requirements are really key to know. All right, and another sometimes difficult part of DACA, especially now that it's returned, is the presence requirements. So it still has its old original presence requirement, and that is proving that you've been present in the United States since June 15th, 2007 till now, okay? It's been pretty heartbreaking to work with some individuals because a lot of them unfortunately didn't arrive before that date, or they did, and it was maybe just a few months or years before, and they have no record at all of having entered. So they're very strict with that. USCIS is proving every single month of every one of those years that you've been present. All right, and so another key element is the criminal history, and that's where I truly believe having an attorney, especially if you've had any kind of arrest, is really key because it's very sensitive, it's very specific on what will disqualify you or not. You cannot have any felonies. You cannot have any significant misdemeanors, and we put that in quotes for a reason. USCIS has made a specific list of misdemeanors that will disqualify you, domestic violence, certain drug charges, and we'll get into how that's even kind of sensitive because they have to specifically be misdemeanors in order to disqualify you. And then no more than 3 or more regular misdemeanors, so those not listed on the list. All right, so I'll let Bridget discuss the educational component because like she mentioned, we were in a consult and you could see the light bulb go off. She was really excited to bring, you know, the old world of Bridget and her experience to this. And I'm really, again, thankful and excited we get to introduce this to our clients.
Thank you, Melissa. So the educational component is huge. Many of our clients, many DACA recipients, I would say, I want to phrase it as traditional educational proof. So they're either enrolled in school, whether that's a high school, GED program, HSED, enrolled in a traditional type setting. So they have to be enrolled, or they can have their diploma, high school diploma, GED certificate, HSED certificate, or they can be have an honorable military discharge. So those are kind of the ways to fit into that criteria. But like I mentioned, those 2,000 individuals in Wisconsin that, you know, would meet all the other criteria except for these, what do we do with them? So we put on our creative thinking caps and we partner with literacy councils, right? So enrolled in school, that's the important thing to focus on here. So I'm just going to read this and I'm sure you can follow along, but I believe everybody here today, your program probably falls in this realm. An education, literacy, or career vocational training program with a purpose of improving literacy, math, English, or is designed to lead to placement in post-secondary education, job training, or employment. I would bet that you probably 100% of people listening today, your programs may fall in to that definition. The programs also need to be in whole or in part grant funded. So that's grant funding from local, state, federal, but it needs to have some sort of grant funding or a registered nonprofit. Oftentimes those two go hand in hand. Or this is where the creative cap really comes on, programs of demonstrated effectiveness. I think to have a good argument, probably it'd be good to have all three of these. Grant funded, nonprofit, program of demonstrated effectiveness. But as lawyers, I guess that's our job to try to argue that a program would fit in and how they'd fit in. The burden is really on the DACA applicant, so the person who is applying for DACA, to show that this program that they're enrolled in is effective. So that is key. The government is not going to go do the research and find out about this program and see. They want the applicant to present them with the packet of information, literally, showing how it's effective. So things could be such as program duration, how long the program's been around. Now, if this is a fly by the seat of your pants type of internet program that popped up last week, that probably is not going to be that strong of an effective program. But many of the programs around Milwaukee, around the state, have been around for years. And that duration is great. A track record. The move, I know when I was coordinator until today, has really been to focus on program outcomes. And I know as coordinators, a lot of you are trying to be creative and struggling to find ways, because your clients, especially in the virtual now with COVID, right? Everybody's here, there, and everywhere. It's hard to keep track of what types of outcomes, but it's really important. And if your program has some sort of database, some sort of way to track what you're actually doing and the outcomes, wow, that's incredible. And that's going to help. It's going to help these individuals who are applying for DACA. So, if you're struggling, why am I keeping all this data? Why is it important? It's important. The government believes it's important, and your students are going to rely on it to show that you have this quality program. Okay, so you meet the criteria. Your DACA applicant meets the criteria. What happens next? Well, Erica is really she's our DACA guru since as Melissa mentioned, the new applications are able to start happening since December again. So it's an application process. There's about 3 kind of thick applications that individuals need to fill out for an initial DACA application. They have to talk about their background, if they've had any police contact, employment factors, demographics, when they came to the country, things like that. So we help them, fill out their paperwork correctly, make sure they've crossed all their T's, dotted all their I's. The cost to apply for DACA is $495 for the applicants. And it's really huge. During the Trump administration, the renewal period for people to renew was shrunk down to 1 year. So every year the individuals had to pay almost $500 to renew their application. And now it's expanded back to 2 years, what the original intent of the program was. So that's a little bit of a less of a financial burden for a lot of people. That 1 year can make a difference. It's $250 a year instead of $500. And then the proof needed, as Melissa mentioned, it's exhaustive. They need to prove presence, which Erica is very detailed, very organized. proving where you were, how many years ago, 10 years ago. It's incredible, especially for kids who are brought here and, they haven't been keeping track of these things. So they're relying on parents, on old pictures, back when pictures had dates stamped on the back of them. It's really a puzzle trying to fit all these different pieces together. So Erica can really attest that, right? It's really a challenge for some people. Would you say, Erica?
Yeah, definitely. What I'm seeing now is mostly that either people who have just turned 15 are having issues proving their presence in 2007, or older folks that qualify for DACA have a really, really hard time finding something that will prove their presence starting in 2007.
Do you want to share the example that we were talking about, how creative that you have to get sometimes?
Yeah, so I actually have a couple cases right now that they're just having so much trouble finding anything for June of 2007. So I've had parents literally digging through all of the pictures that they have, trying to find something that's date stamped. I do have one girl right now who, it's a miracle that she found a picture, but she found one. And what we're doing now is having a letter accompany her picture.
In the video games, didn't you go that route too with a client?
Yeah, so social media and video games and stuff like that works really well because a lot of it keeps track of your location. So I know that sometimes we try to be private and we don't really want our phones to know where we are at all times, but that actually really works for DACA recipients and DACA applicants because it shows where you work. It shows that your house here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or wherever you're located, it tracks where you are.
Right, and it shows that when you weren't in an educational program, you were busy playing your game.
Right.
And the flip side of that is I've heard about a lot of people when the families first came with the children that were young, they tried to really live under the radar. So they didn't have pictures. They didn't, some people didn't have social media. They have no receipts. They had, so they were trying to protect their family, but now as Erica's working to try to find their proof, they don't have a lot. So she does an excellent job of guiding these clients through this difficult process. I'd like to talk a little bit about the proof needed for, the educational component, which I think relates directly to probably all of you listening today. So the traditional, again, would be your diploma, your enrollment registration forms at a high school, at a college, at an HSCD program, at MATC, we see a lot of clients from. But for the non-traditional, this creative realm with literacy councils, and again, the burden is on the applicant. So if you are able to work with a DACA applicant or a lawyer to try to prove the educational component, some things that I would suggest, your 501c3 documentation, perhaps a program brochure to prove the legitimacy. If you have a summary of program outcomes, any specific client progress reports. Some programs, might have periodic reports, monthly, yearly, any sort of records that you have on the students' attendance, progress, achievements, excellent. So, more reasons to keep track of all these records that I know is a big goal and a big challenge for many literacy programs. As an educator, you may be asked or may feel compelled to write a letter on behalf of your student. So some tips to keep in mind would be, if you have letterhead from your program, that would be preferred. The letter should state your relationship, should include dates. of attendance, when they started to when it ended, or if it's still ongoing, dates that how often, how frequent, was it weekly, was it twice a week? And this can not only, as Erica mentioned, the physical presence proof. So this letter could not only help the educational, but also to prove that the client was physically present here, which is a key that we need to prove as attorneys on behalf of our clients. And any other anecdotal information in a letter to personalize it to show the reviewer of the application that this is a legitimate program, legitimate student, and this person is going places. I think those are really helpful. And again, if the letter is notarized or includes the federal perjury language, that would be preferred as well. We get a lot of questions about the application process. How long does this take? As Melissa mentioned, this is just kind of the initial applications are just starting up again in December, but we like to say 6 to 9 months. It could be sooner. We've seen some kind of eye-opening things happen. Could be longer. USCIS is really dealing with a lot of backlog, but it seems I've seen some kind of random, super fast approvals of initial applications. On the flip side of that, we're seeing long delays. So it's not something like if you apply today, you're going to get approved next week. It's a process. And I believe that the amount of proof and the thoroughness of all the aspects of your application, especially that education application, would hopefully provide a smoother process and a quicker approval. Okay, so we're going to talk now about advanced parole. Melissa?
All right. This is one of my favorite things because along with a lot of the cool benefits of getting a driver's license, social security number, ability to work with DACA, you can also apply for advanced parole, which if you think about it, for those of you who have made trips outside the United States, you don't really think much about how cool that is, which for these individuals, most of them are kids, they never get to do study abroad programs. If their work wants to send them to a cool training, none of those things are available to them, and now they are, okay? They have to have a DACA, current status with DACA. So it's not like something they can just apply directly for it. They have to first have DACA and then they can apply separately for the advanced parole. But it does exactly what I've said. It allows them to leave the United States and then come back lawfully, which is pretty huge. It can, and I won't get into the nitty gritty because it's a little bit complicated, but it can also open up some doors for them to take DACA to the next level and apply for their green card. Advanced parole does have certain requirements along with having DACA. You must apply based off of an educational, work, or humanitarian reasons in order to travel. So a lot of times for the humanitarian reasons, it's to see a sick relative, someone who's passed away, things like that.
Melissa, could you share your the cookie story?
Oh yes, I love this story. So this was before it was taken away again. So pre-2017, I had a young lady married to a cop. A beautiful little family. She wanted to, like I said, take it to the next level and be able to get her green card here in the United States. For all intents and purposes, she should have been able to. She was married to a US citizen, but we made the process a lot simpler for her by getting her advanced parole. And we did it by finding her a class on cookie making and decorating out of Mexico City. So she flew and took that class, and she came back, and it benefited her in her workplace. She worked at a country club as a chef and a baker. And so that country club now has really excellent cookies, and she has a green card that now benefits her and her cute little family. All right, so I thought I would speak a little bit briefly on some bills that have been, or a bill that's been introduced last week. There's a lot of excitement building about it. It's not yet law. It's still just at the beginning stages of the legislative process. But if it's passed into law exactly the way that it's drafted, it would benefit two big groups pretty significantly. The first being people who don't have DACA or TPS or any other kind of temporary status. If they can show that they've been present here in the United States since the beginning of this year, they'll be able to apply for a DACA-like status that'll last for 6 years, but after 5 years, they'll be able to apply for their green card. So that's pretty huge. It's kind of expanding what the DACA process has given so many to more individuals. The next camp that would really be affected by that are our DACA folks. So DACA and TPS. TPS is temporary protected status. Without getting into it, it's very similar to DACA, but it's country specific. And it happened in the late 90s to early 2000s. So those individuals would be able to actually apply for a green card immediately. So as soon as the bill passes and it's implemented, those individuals will be able to get their green card. After they've had their green card for 5 years, they can apply for citizenship. So in saying that both groups can apply for citizenship, that's also a nice tie-in with the literacy program. I'm sure a lot of you have already met with folks that are preparing for their citizenship exam, but that's also a key element of applying for citizenship is proving your English skills, okay? But I'll just emphasize again that we're all excited because it would affect the people that we love to serve, but it's not yet law.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. So we've told you everything you need to know about DACA, right, in 45 minutes or about a little under. So now it's your turn. We have a couple examples of typical scenarios that we see at our office of individuals who are applying for DACA. So we're going to go through each one. At the end, we'll put a poll up, and I'm going to ask you to say, yes, does this person qualify? No, definitely not. They don't qualify. Or maybe I need to call Soborowski immigration law. I'm not sure. Okay, so this will be a fun little way to interact a little bit more virtually here. So first hypothetical. We see this all the time. Juan came to the United States at age 6. He was brought here by his parents, never left the country, doesn't even remember the country he left behind, speaks English perfectly. He's now 21 years old. He went to Pius High School, graduated with honors. He was on the swim team. Great guy. He's now a student at UW-Milwaukee. He has no legal status. What do you think? Is Juan eligible to apply for DACA? Anna, are you able to put oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, it looks like 86% of people said yes, and you are correct. Juan can apply for DACA. So in his case, he would simply need his high school diploma. He could also throw in his registration at UW-Milwaukee, and he needs to prove his presence like we talked about. So Juan, definitely, he can apply. Okay, let's try another. Good job, guys. So next, Teresa, she's 28, came here from Mexico. She lives in Milwaukee with her husband, who is a teacher, and her 2 young children. She came to the US at age 16, undocumented. She came with her parents. She worked hard, got her GED from MATC. She has it in hand. And she works in a local factory. So she's a mom, she's a factory worker, has her GED, has big hopes for the future. Is Teresa eligible for DACA? Okay, those who answered no are correct. And why is that? Because Melissa mentioned earlier, the DACA program is very age specific. So the age that's important here is that she came when she was 16. Doesn't matter if she came here at age 16 in 1 day or 16 in 364 days, because she came to the United States after she turned 16, she unfortunately is not eligible to apply for DACA, even though she has all of the other criteria. Okay, third scenario. Ahmed is 31. He entered the US on a visitor's visa at the age of 12 in 2002. He dropped out of high school to work full-time, support his family, never obtained a GED. He is enrolled in a literacy program in Walworth County. He attends classes with his tutor twice per week. They're working on GED skills. They're working on math skills. They're working on workforce development skills. So he can apply for a better job. Is Ahmed eligible for DACA? Interesting. Okay. The answer is yes, most probably. Because he is enrolled in a literacy program. It's a nonprofit. The Walworth County Literacy Council is a nonprofit, receives grant funding, it's a results-based program. He's going to include all of that information in his DACA application, and Ahmed will hopefully be approved. Okay, last hypothetical. You guys are doing great. Justin has all of the qualifications for an initial DACA application. He meets the physical presence, the education, everything, all the dates line up. However, last summer during COVID, he and a couple buddies were drinking a few beers and he drove home. Not the smartest decision, but he was pulled over while driving drunk. He received a citation for an OWI, operating while intoxicated. It was his first one, and for driving with an expired license. He has everything else going for him. Is he eligible for DACA? So this is a really interesting one. The answer is yes, he is eligible for DACA. And why is that? Because we were just talking about the criminal implications and how you can't have any sort of criminal activity on your record. Here's the caveat. In Wisconsin, an OWI first is not a misdemeanor. In fact, a second is not a misdemeanor if it happened 10 years after the first one. So OWIs in Wisconsin are considered a municipal citation and ordinance, as well as that driving with an expired license. Citations, not misdemeanors. This is huge for people in Wisconsin. Now, obviously the best answer is don't drink and drive. But in a situation like this, it's really important to consider that this is a person, he made a mistake, he really regrets it, he's not going to do it again, and DACA could be a pathway for him. So the answer is yes, he can apply for DACA. So, questions. What questions do you have about DACA? We're here to answer, to talk, to share. See if Whoops, sorry. Whoops, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Any questions? Let's look at those questions in the chat. Do we have anything? I'd like to share a story about one of our DACA recipients, and just how important this program, this protection is for people. Erica and I actually, in January, we had a new client come in. Actually, she had DACA for a while. She was in her late 20s, I believe, and a nurse. And she came to us absolutely distraught because with COVID and everything, she forgot to renew her DACA. So it expired. She literally had just no clue. Understandable given that it's COVID. She's a nurse working on the front lines. So this poor client literally was in an operating type situation, and she was pulled out of the operating room by her HR department, who discovered the lapse and told her, you need to go home right now. This was a traumatic experience for her. We got her paperwork together right away, sent it out. Hopefully she's going to be one of the individuals who gets a quick turnaround and will get her green card so she can go back to the hospital that she was working in the Milwaukee area. But it just goes to show, I mean, our DACA applicants and recipients are everywhere and they're vital. She was literally in the middle of a medical procedure. So it just goes to show how amazing these individuals are, you know, helping people in a dire situation, and how critical this DACA protection is for so many. I don't know if anybody else wants to share any scenarios that they might have. Ooh, we have a good question here. A couple questions coming in. Thank you. Okay. Approximately how much will it cost by using our firm for DACA? That's the first question coming. Does anybody want to take this? Melissa?
Sure, I can. So we're right around $1,000 for an initial application. The biggest sort of expense, so to speak, for our firm to put it together, and Erica can again attest to this, is putting that evidence together. It's such a thorough process with all those months. Wouldn't you say, Erica, some of those applications end up being like close to a ream thick? How long would you say it takes you to put together a case from start to finish?
Well, depending on on how old they are and yeah, like whatever they can bring in, it'll maybe take me about 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes longer. It just really depends on the applicant themselves. I know that sometimes it can be really difficult to collect evidence, period. I am finding that some school districts are just making it really hard for alumni to request transcripts, to request even attendance records, stuff like that. So it can be a little time consuming, but if you are thinking about applying for DACA, really try to prepare yourselves as much as you can. You know, we do have to prove your presence from June 2007 to the present. So if you are thinking about applying for DACA, just be cognizant of that and try to collect as much as you can. But if you come to me with all of your evidence and it's all organized and pretty, I mean, we can have your application out within 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So it really just depends.
That's a pretty long time, weeks to put together a case, and then the 4 to 6 months or more for, you know, representing them while the case is being decided. For renewals, though, we're just under $300.
Yep. And the renewal applicants don't need to supply all of that proof information.
I'm glad you bring that up. Yes, unless, right, Erica, they've let their application go or their status go more than a year, then they have to basically start from scratch again.
Yes.
Okay. Our next question says, talks about writing letters of support from the educational perspective. It states, are there other things that literacy programs can do to help our students who are on DACA? So I'm assuming that means who currently have DACA or not applying for it. I mean, I would say just if the student already has DACA, keep doing what you're doing. They only need to prove that they're in an educational program when they apply initially. So that's when they submit their application, that's the key, that they have to show that they're in that program. What happens after that is, from the eyes of the government, not as important as when they submit their application. And if that wasn't the intent of that question, please, if you could just supplement in the chat. Hypothetical Teresa, have any other options? Let's go back to Teresa. Oh boy. Hypothetical Teresa, her other options, good question. Well, let's assume that Teresa, her husband, is a US citizen or a legal permanent resident. Yes, she, in that situation with the current state of things, definitely she would have options. Her husband, if he's a US citizen or legal permanent resident, could petition for Teresa to become a citizen. That's a very, as it is right now, a very, very long and arduous process. From start of that process to the end, I mean, Melissa, would you be fair to say it's about 8 years? 5 to 8 years?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. I mean, you're experiencing on your end, you handle a lot of these cases. They're complicated and take years, right?
Yes, and Teresa would have more obstacles because she is undocumented. It's not simply a matter of her husband just giving her a petition or submitting a petition for her, and then she gets to go to an interview in Milwaukee and then she's approved. It is a tedious process of an application to prove that they're married and they have a legitimate marriage, followed by another application to ask the government to waive her unlawful presence in the United States, which is a very daunting, huge task to show the hardship to her husband. In the eyes of the government, they unfortunately, in that aspect, don't really care about the impact of the young children. The focus is on the hardship that her husband would have if she would need to leave to go back to Mexico, or if the family would have to relocate to Mexico. So that's called a waiver, and it's a very intense process for Teresa. And then at the end of that, if she receives a waiver to waive her unlawful presence here in the United States since age 16, then she has to deal with another branch of the government, the Department of State, and she has to return to Mexico. I work with firsthand with a lot of these clients. So she has to go to Mexico after submitting yet another application, and she has an interview with the consular officer in Ciudad Juarez. So many, many, many steps along the way, extreme cost, extreme time, extreme emotionally just tormenting a lot of individuals. We're hoping for change in this realm. Melissa touched on that, but that's the way, that's Teresa's option right now. Good question, Lily Barrett. How should the tutor communicate or inform their student about the DACA opportunity? Good question. I think the tutors, our website actually, and our Soborowski Immigration Law has a ton of resources. Melissa really does a good job of informing our audience, our followers, about DACA options. So I think an easy, a first step might be for if a tutor thinks, you know, my student might qualify, I would refer them to look at the DACA qualifications. I know the Walworth County Literacy Council also shared Sobrowski immigration law, kind of what you need to do to apply for a DACA. So that'd be a good first step. We offer initial consultations if a student, you know, would like to see if they might qualify. So they can certainly contact our office. So those are kind of first steps. Just have in mind, it's very date and age specific. So that's not really a decision that I think a tutor should make. But if you have an idea, if you have an inkling that maybe this person might qualify, and the education components right there, refer them to either us or there's many other organizations around the state that are doing this good work too. So just get the ball rolling. Let them know that there is an option. A lot of people think this 2,000 person number that I mentioned, a lot of people think they just can't do it because they don't have a GED or HSED or diploma. And that's the biggest takeaway from today, is that there are options, and that's the connection with the literacy programs. So if you see that kind of wall, that blockade coming up, like I can't apply until I get my GED, that's not the truth. They can if they're enrolled in one of your programs. Next question.
Oh, do you mind if I add just one more?
Sure.
So another misconception that people might find while they're teaching their students, a lot of people think the 31 qualifier means that if you're over the age of 31, you no longer qualify for DACA. It's not that. It's that you could not have been older than 31 on that specific date in 2012. So that's another one out there. If you have folks, I think they would be close to 40 years old. So as long as they're under that age, they're going to be fine.
Yep, good point. Good point. Diane has a question from Walworth County. Is there a requirement that the applicant hasn't left the country since arriving? Yes. Melissa or Erica, do you want to talk to that?
Well, I think that as long as they can prove that they were only gone for a very short period of time, they would still be able to qualify for DACA.
Right. There is a provision that will, and you have to prove it that it was, I think the legal term is brief and innocent, if the departure was brief and innocent. So like Erica said, probably 6 months or less at least. But if they were gone for, more than 6 months, a year, which sometimes happens, that would certainly call into question whether they qualify. And I would also urge them just to speak to an immigration attorney specifically, because there's other things that could happen to them if they admit that to the government on their departures. So that is a great question, because that can make them kind of sensitive to even other options beyond DACA.
Okay. Next question. Is there a risk that an application would lead to removal proceedings for someone who does not qualify for DACA? As with completing applications for citizenship, should DACA application completion only be done by attorneys or USCIS accredited programs? Melissa or Erica, do you want to address this one?
So there was a while when a denied application of any sort through USCIS would result in what's called a notice to appear in immigration court. So it would trigger you being put in deportation proceedings. It was later clarified that there was an exception for those who had DACA. And it was interpreted that it would also extend to people who applied for DACA. So I had never heard of anybody apply for DACA and then get in trouble. The only maybe exception under that was if they were on some sort of list that showed that they were a threat to national security. So that's kind of a broad topic, like maybe listed on some sort of law enforcement gang affiliation list. I've heard of that happening, but I never heard about it like triggering a removal proceeding.
Okay, I guess I skipped over a question here. Talk about both. How do we help those who want to apply? So I think that goes back to the previous question about how do you as Literacy Council programs help people who want to apply, either who have DACA or who want to apply. I think it kind of just goes to everything we're talking about, that let them know that there's the option, that this education roadblock is not a roadblock, and just we need to be creative and put our thinking caps on and really demonstrate that they meet this educational requirement because of their enrollment in a legitimate program. To help those who want to apply, keep them informed, let them know what you know, what we're imparting to you today. Please send them our way if they're looking for representation. Lots of resources, again, around the entire state to help these individuals. Initial consultation, our regular initial consultation fee at our office, we can do that via phone, video, or in person. So we have a lot of people who don't live in the Milwaukee area, in fact, are from out of state. We have some from as far away as Arizona that are applying for DACA with us. Our initial consultation fee is $80. There are some circumstances where an individual may need a reduced fee. They might meet some criteria, and that would be $40. Okay. And I'm seeing that someone would like to take a screenshot. I'm not sure if this is one of the screens that you would like to see, but if there's this particular one, let me know and I can change it if you want to take that picture of it. I guess I'll just wrap up here at this screen then. Our contact information is listed here. We are on Facebook. Attorney Sobrowski does an amazing job of reaching people through social media. Many of our clients, that's their main source to find out what's happening. So she has great resources, great articles on our Facebook page. So I'd welcome you to find us on social media. We also have our email listed there. Our website has great information. And then our phone number to always call if you have questions, to schedule a consultation, anything along those lines. So I just want to close out by saying thank you to all of you Literacy Council programs. You guys are doing absolutely amazing work. I hope that today we've imparted a little bit about how important your work really is, and so much more than just the educational component has such a far reach in so many corners of the law, corners of the world. So thank you. Keep doing what you're doing, the hard work. I know it's a lot, but you guys are really making an impact. So thank you. And we're here. I'm sorry, someone's asking about a DACA page. Perfect. If you can see in the chat, Attorney Sobrowski has listed the website, the USCIS website for DACA immigration. It's another great resource that tutors, programs can give to their students. I think we covered everything else. If something comes up afterwards, we're here to answer questions through email, phone. Just please reach out to us. And thank you so much. I don't know if Melissa or Erica, if you had anything in closing that you'd like to share.
No, just thank you for the opportunity.
If anybody does have questions and they email the info@soborowskilaw.com, those emails will be forwarded to me. So if there's like specific questions that you had, just know that they're not going to just a general inbox. They will be forwarded to me and I'll be able to respond to those emails.
Okay, so you are info@soborowski.com. Wonderful. Well, I can't begin to thank the three of you enough. This was fascinating. I can't believe how much is involved in all of this, and so kind of you to give up your time today to inform us on what we can do to support our students. Now, excuse me, and going forward, hoping that more good things come out of this administration in terms of making life just a little easier for our students that are here. So yes, so thank you so much for all of you too. Thank you for joining us. This has been recorded, so if you would like staff or friends or family to hear this, it will be up on our website in a little, give us a little bit of time, and usually it's there within a day or two. So again, thanks so much for being here. Thanks to our presenters.